Hey everyone, Ekman here with another video, and last night I held my first Junior Arena event, not only of the year, but the first one with the new Demon Slayer set legal. So honestly, it was a lot of fun. We had over 100 players, which I'm super happy about. I really appreciate you guys showing up to these events and supporting them, and they're always a lot of fun. So real quick though, before we get started, if you guys enjoy Union Arena content, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if you guys want any of the deck lists from the top 16, you can find them on my website, which is linked in the description. I also want to thank CJ, Tyler, and also Sos, our strongest wizard, for helping with the event last night too. And we did live stream the entire event, which you can find linked in the description on my YouTube here as well. But again, a super fun event, and I always enjoy running these Union Arena events, and I'm already looking forward to the future ones, which probably will happen around the release of One Punch Man, which is the end of February here in North America. So, but for this event, I do want to go over it. So we do have 106 players, 6 rounds of Swiss best of 1. So the pair down did lose in round number 6, so it could have gone 7 rounds, which is why we have a couple more, I think, X1s than we normally would. But in the top 16, we did have 5 copies of Purple Code Geass, 4 copies of Blue JJK, with one of them winning the event, 3 copies of Green Hunter x Hunter Kurapika, 2 yellow Demon Slayer, which is one of the newer decks in the format, 1 yellow JJK, and a Code Geass Green as well. So pretty diverse. I think it's pretty clear that Purple Code Geass and Blue JJK are the strongest decks in the format right now, but they are also very present. They did take about a third of the field. We also had Purple Bleach was the 3rd most popular deck in this format, but we didn't get any in the top 16, and we did have 2 different copies in an X2 finish, which we'll go over Greg's version as well, who ended up getting 20th place with it. And then we also see a good amount of Kurapika, which I think like there's just a lot of people who picked up Hunter x Hunter Green when Union Arena came out. They like the deck, they stuck with it, and it's still pretty solid, I think, in a lot of ways. It does kind of brick sometimes, and it doesn't kind of high roll as much as some of these other decks, but it's moderately consistent for what it does, and some decks really can't answer like this 5k snipe card, which is super duper strong too. So I think that's pretty fair for that. We have been seeing, I think, again, like last Purple Bleach, and it's very clear that Purple Code Geass and Blue JJK are very present in this meta too. But we've got a lot of decks to go over today. We actually got 9 specific ones that we're going to go over as well. And again, if you do want access to any of these decks or many others, you can find them linked on my website, Eggman Events, which is in the description. But starting off, we do have our first place list, which is Lawrence's version of Blue JJK. We'll also go over another Blue JJK, because there are kind of 2 different ways to build it, but the first place list is more of this Nanami build of it here. So Nanami is a raid card from the set. It does have this character gains 1000 BP, impact 1, and damage 2 if you have 15 or less cards in your deck, which does take a little bit of elbow grease to get there, but you can get there pretty consistently. Normally it happens like right at the end, right before you're about to lose. This kind of turns on and gets a lot of effects. But also the when sideline of placing 2 cards on the top of your deck into your sideline, if you do, up to one of your opponent's characters gets switched to resting, that I think is really impactful for this meta too. Some decks just want to keep swinging, and so this being able to have essentially a double block is super good. And then also, like, so early game you can use it as more of a defensive tool, and then late game you can use it as more of an offensive tool. I think that's really good in its way too. We also do have a good amount of our just like general Yuji and Sukuna stuff, right? One of the key things I do think about this deck is that we have 8 different cards that can raid on top of a Yuji, which is really strong, which we'll look at a little bit more on the other Blue JJK. But I think this deck is really strong. I have been playing this one a little bit more than others, and it's really cool. It's the sequencing is really interesting, the way that you try to get to that 15 cards to deck. Like you'll find yourself like, man, I'm at like 18 cards right now. Is there a way to get there? And when you are able to do so, I think that's really cool. So last thing I will say is that we are playing 2 copies of Nobara, the 2 double energy. I haven't been seeing this one as much, but I do think being able to get to 4 energy on our energy line without having to play too many bodies is helpful, and just being able to get 2 double energies to set up our 4 drop plays, I think is helpful in its own way too. So this deck is really fun. I think it's also very strong. Congratulations to Lawrence for winning the event. And then also our other our next topping, Blue JJK, which was running not the Nanami build, which of the people who did top with it, everyone was playing more of like the Sukuna build compared to like the Nanami build. But this is Jamey's version of the deck here, and again, like these Yujis are just so good. Like I think like and also you'll see this one, and we'll talk about it when we get to Purple Code Geass. I think some of the power for this deck is just how many cards in our deck have triggers, right? There's only 4 cards, right? There's 2 copies of Gojo and 2 copies of Maki in this build. Everything else has the potential to trigger off of life, which is really strong. And then for this one, it's essentially the same thing, 2 copies of Gojo but 4 copies of Maki. So this could be one of the worst cards, quote unquote, for the deck, but I do think a lot of people have been accepting Maki as just a really good setup card for the deck. Being able to draw 2, being able to essentially be a 3,000 on defense pretty consistently too, since it just cares about if you have 4 or more. Curse tools are just event cards, which you will get 4 event cards into your sideline pretty quick in any of these blue JJK builds. So I think that's strong in its own way. But just the fact, yeah, we have so many different triggers that we can be using. The fact that we also have, like, again, Yuji has 10 different cards that it can raid into, so chances are every game that you play of this deck, it's very likely you're going to have at least one raid trigger with either one of the Yujis, with one of the Sukunas, so you can just really consistently say, as long as I end my turn every turn with a Yuji and at least 4 required energy or energy generation, you're going to consistently get at least 1 or 2 free raid triggers from your life, just because of how many of these different targets you have for it. So I think people who set that up and recognize that can really take advantage of getting quote unquote lucky with how good these are. And these are just fantastic cards too. Either getting like draw ones, being able to push up a 4K blocker is really great, and it does really accelerate your plays too. So this is Jamey's build of it. The last thing I'll say is that I've been seeing most people jump from 1 to 2 versions or 2 copies of Shrine here to try to help us get to the end game and get some more power. Being able to get damage to even Snipe. I think Snipe is like the big card effect for it. 4 copies to get impact 1 is nice. I won't get that wrong, but Snipe I think is really helpful for getting some removal where we don't always have targeted. Like sometimes Yuji can like bounce to hand, right? And like this, our 5-cost Sukuna can also interact with a little bit by resting it, but just getting a hard removal off like a copy of like the Snipe is good, especially if we're using it with a 4-drop Sukuna, since we can get impact with 2 or more, which is really easy. So other than that, I think this deck is obviously very strong. A lot of people are on it, and I think it's for a good reason. So this is Jamey's build. Congratulations for their top 4 finish there. And then for second place, we've got Jonathan with their copy of Purple Code Geass. And again, you'll look at this deck and we only are running like 4 cards without any of the triggers with it. So it's just a really strong consistency piece for a deck like this to be able to say every card I hit out of my life is going to draw me a card, has the potential to be like an active trigger, something like that. Like it comes up pretty often, and you do get a lot of advantage for free. Where I think most decks and most kind of archetypes before this, before like Code Geass and JJK, like triggers were like half the deck, but not nearly the same percentage as we've been seeing in these ones. So some different cards I've been seeing in this one comparatively. We are running 2 copies of Ogi, which I don't see this one as often, but like double energy generation is never a bad thing. We are seeing a bunch of one-ofs, including the 1 copy of C2. We also have the Colin from the set too, so being able to look for a Gurren card off the top 5 is not too bad, since we are running 10 different copies of it. I am surprised we're only playing 2 copies of Mark II, since this can be very great for removal. I think there's a lot of decks right now that only push up like 1 card early game, and being able to kind of have targeted removal off that is really good. We are playing 4 copies of the other Gurren though, which is a little bit stronger for removal for 3K and getting impact 1 too, so I don't think that's terrible for us. We also are playing 1 copy of the Lelouch from the starter deck that we didn't get, but being able to remove something with 3K less BP is nice, especially since we can sequence it with something like the 2-drop Lelouch, 2-drop Lelouch, and then playing this for 4 or for 2 action points after generating 4 can just get rid of a 4K, which is really strong. We also have 1 copy of the super rare from the set, being able to not be blocked, but placing I guess just being able to get some cycle here, just another Lelouch in the deck to help for variety's sake. I think is interesting. And then also a copy of Checkmate, which giving something impact is I think strong to end a lot of games. Most people will try to play around that, or be able to say, you know what, these Gurren Mark IIs only get impact when on the turn they're played, and they don't get to keep it. So being able to give another one if needed, I think is strong too. So generally, like, this is a more variety centric version of this deck, more so than I usually see, but I'm definitely thinking that some of these cards definitely paid off as well. So it's going to be interesting to see if there's any more changes we see for Purple Code Geass, or if this is just kind of more of a test build, and if there's going to be more of like choosing specific text to kind of grill into what you really want to do with the deck. But it's clearly very strong. A lot of people are on it. Congratulations to Jonathan for their second place finish with the Purple Code Geass. The next up, we've got Green Hunter x Hunter, which again was doing very good in this event. We did have 3 different copies in the top 16, with 2 of them going Actually, what, three of them? Three of them going X1, which is really cool. So we do have this copy here, which is Lazarus's version of it. Something that I noticed from this one compared to some other ones, one, we don't have as much, like we have a little bit more variety in some of the cards that we chose for this one. One immediately is the Pockle, just having Nullify Impact, I think is strong for this meta. Just making it so you don't have to take as much damage early game is good. And generally for green, like Hunter x Hunter, you just have so many cards you have to rotate through. So, and you kind of have to push like your 1-drop weenies up in the early game, so you do have room to be able to play your double energy late game to get to 7. So Pockle, I think, is a really good card for that. Additionally, we also have the Melody, which we play it early and then we can push it up, and then you don't, you know, it's a little bit unprotected on the front line, but it does count as a like double energy if you want to think of it that way, since you're able to generate 2 energy with this card and another single energy without taking up 2 spots in your energy line. And then we also have the Leorio, which this card actually, from what I was able to see from some games during the event, this card put in a lot of work. Being able to just have an impact card, the fact that it's 5k, the fact that this card can let you draw a card is super solid in a lot of ways, and it's something you can just kind of set in the back row, kind of early game as your single copy of a single energy, and then push it up later in the game. I don't know, this just seemed really solid. You will find yourself in a lot of times where you will have some extra energy or action points to be able to use, since you don't have as much, you kind of start running out of cards. So I think Leorio is a good way to kind of start re-evaluating and re-adding those cards back to your hand too. Other than that, we are only playing 3 copies of the color trigger, which is fine. Green's color trigger is not super great, and it's really situational, and if you run out of cards, like, this doesn't really do anything. 3 copies of the Killua is really interesting. So choose up to 1 character in your opponent's front line with BP equal than or less to than the highest BP of the other characters on your field and sideline it. So you can't choose this one, but you can do some kind of tricky plays where you can like use Leori's effect to make it a 5k and then use this, get rid of a 5k or less. So that can kind of come up. I think 3 copies is a little bit aggressive, but it does get a lot of good removal. So I do respect that. And then obviously we got to play the 7-drop Kurapika. But I think this is it's still a really solid deck. It's been good since release of this card game in North America, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. It's a little bit linear, but it is very strong. And again, like 5k impact 1 with snipe, it does a lot. This card does so much in this game, and it's still kind of, if your opponent's able to set up 2, you're not really doing anything. It does a lot. So this is the build here from Lazarus, and congratulations for their top 4 finish with green Hunter x Hunter. And then we have one of the newer decks on the block. We've got yellow Demon Slayer. So this is Joshua's version of the deck here, and this one honestly is a lot of fun from what I've been able to see from it. I'm not a big fan of like yellow in this card game in general. I think it's a little bit inconsistent, and I do think this build did have some issues at times. The big thing that I would say that I noticed compared to builds that I've been testing is that we aren't playing any of the Zenitsu 2-drop that searches for our Nezuko's, our Tanjiro's, and our Inosuke too. So we are playing like the Obanai, which does draw us a card and put 1 card into our sideline, but obviously doesn't go as deep for our Nezuko's. I think this card is such an important card for how this deck functions that it's justified searching for it. And sometimes I feel bad about searchers in this game because it does bottom deck our special and final triggers, since those aren't generally not searchable in this game. This card is so dang important that it's just worth it in my own mind. So to be able to search this card outright, so I think it's kind of worth for the deck. We're also playing the Tengen for more double energy, but I do like playing the Inosuke if we are playing the Zenitsu for it, but I digress from my own builds. We are playing Obanai, which most people I think are choosing this as like our 3rd copy of a 0 cost, which I think is fine for the deck, especially since it's a 2k and can draw us a card off trigger, which is really nice. We are playing a good amount of triggers in this deck too. We also do have some ways for some additional double energy with the Canal here. And then we are playing the 2, 4, and 4 split of our Tanjiros, being 4 copies of the color trigger. So I think I mentioned this before. I don't think you need to play 4 copies of this one if you want it to find room for other cards with it. We're also playing 1 copy of Giyu here. This is just like a really defensive card, being able to nullify impact, but also being able to just not be removed. It's a solid investment into like a frontline card to be able to get like a block or prevent your opponent from doing impact damage. So that I think is really strong in its own way. And in general, I really like yellow Demon Slayer. It's one of my more favorite decks currently in this game, and it's been a lot of fun. And I do appreciate us getting like the binder promos for us a little bit early, so this deck is really playable. I think without these cards, this deck would be a little bit unplayable right now in North America. But this Tanjiro, as well as the Nezuko, this one drop Nezuko, just helps the deck so much, and it gives you more things to play, more Tanjiros, more Nezukos, and a better game plan too. So happy to see this one get an X1 finish, and congratulations to Joshua for their build and finish there. Next up, we've got some more yellow. So we've entered the territory of X2s, and we have Lucas's version of yellow JJK, which I've pretty much written off this deck in a lot of ways. I kind of know we're going to talk about a couple more yellow decks too, but I think this deck is good eventually. I know like the second set of specifically JJK does add a lot of support for this, but I am very shocked to see this get an X2 finish for this event. I'm not 100% sure how this deck is supposed to work a little bit. It does kind of do the same thing as Demon Slayer, where you're supposed to get a lot of attacks in on the same turn, with cards like the Chimera Shadow Garden, this being able to say pay 1 AP to give everything plus 1000, but without paying AP. Once per turn, when a Megumi on your field attacks, choose up to one of your Shikigami affinity cards and switch it to active. So you can do something like you can attack with this, and if you can attack with this, which can potentially be double damage, then you attack with your Megumi, which lets you then restand your Divine Dog, right, or your Great Serpent or something like that, right? We also like these one attackings to, like, you can draw 2 cards and trash 2 cards in a turn, or give something plus 500 twice, which can be helpful. So I think that there are some great ways to use this card, but it is a little bit tough to do so. We also have like other Megumis. It doesn't have to be the raid card, and generally it's like this raid card is just okay. The fact that you're able to play a Shikigami is fine, but the fact that we're not like removing things can be a little bit troublesome. We also have our Nobara too, so this just being able to get damage to without being a raid card is fine. But then also when played, choose one character and just stun it can be helpful. So like if your opponent has 4 cards, you can play this Nobara, and if you have the Chimera Shadow Garden on the board, you can do something like have 5 attacks and your opponent can only defend 3 of them max, which means you get like guaranteed 2 damage in, which is really helpful. And sometimes they're going to have to make some unfortunate trades with some of your 4Ks and stuff. So because of that, I think that's something that like this deck can do very well. I think that I'd rather do like the yellow Demon Slayer build, because it's about the same thing but with a little bit less setup, and I think this is a little bit more straightforward in how the deck works. And also we have Impact, which I think having Impact in the deck available to us is a little bit better than not having Impact available to our deck, but I digress on that one. But I think that this is a cool build. I'm happy to see it get X2. Congratulations to Lucas for their finish here. The next up, we've got Lancelot. So this is James' version of the Code Geass Lancelot, and I am surprised to see that we didn't get any X2 or any X1. This was an X2 finish for it. I know a lot of people are believing in this deck, and they are very fond of it as well. Obviously Purple Code Geass gets a little bit more of the attention here, but this is a very strong deck if set up, but it's kind of like more inconsistent version of like Kurapika the same way, right? We have this Lancelot Air Cavalry. It's a very tall card, damage to 5k, has impact 1 when rated. Like there's just so many good things that you get with this card, but if your opponent's able to remove it, then you don't have anything left to do, right? The fact that these cards are great until they're removed is rough for it. But I do like having like the Siegfried kind of little engine for it. So it's using the Jeremiah. So this has step, but also when played, add to 1 character other than Siegfried from your sideline to your hand. Being able to recycle any of your cards you need, so either Lancelot's or Suzaku's, being able to get those back into your hand so you're able to play your combo again is very strong. I do also like having 4 copies of unit maintenance, as well as the 3 copies of the potential triple energy from the head trailer. That just makes it a little bit easier for you to be able to get into your Lancelots more consistently, and I think that helps the deck in its own way too. So it's interesting to see this deck. I haven't been playing it as much as like the Purple Code Geass, and again, it does feel a lot like Green Hunter Kurapika at the same time, but it is very scary if they get their Lancelot off very early, which is possible. And while the consistency for this deck isn't high, and like at times, and it's a little bit linear, it it's the big boy. It's the big beats deck, and it can do the job very well. So this is the build here from James, and congratulations for their top 16 finish. And then next up, to finish up our top 16, we have Matthew's version of the Yellow Demon Slayer, and this is using the Hashira build, which I kind of rid off. And honestly, I look at this deck and all I see is like a bunch of cards, to be honest. It's very, very interesting. Like, they've made this whole kind of archetype around Hashiras, but there's no rating for it. But kind of on the other thing that I've noticed when I've been playing this game more often is that, yeah, rating is really cool, but you kind of give up a body on board, right? Like, you're using an action point to make a better body, but you have to lose a card in hand and a character on board, which can catch up to you sometimes. So to have this build here where you try to have as many like different Hashiras on the board, and your larger Hashiras don't take up, like, you know what I mean, like the fact that you would raid on top of something, you don't gain any additional bodies on board or additional Hashiras. So having an archetype like this with no raid at all, I think is really fascinating. One thing I will say, and I don't know if this is a mistake, and I'll try to fix this if I can, I don't think this should be Inosuke. I think this should be Tengen, right? That just makes a lot more sense in my mind. Like, maybe the active trigger was really good for them, but I'm almost positive that this should have been Tengen. So this could maybe change if you check it on the website later, but this should be Tengen in my mind. It's a double, and it's the exact same stats, but it has Hashira and it's a draw trigger instead of an active trigger, which unless you really, really want the active triggers, right? Which we do see a lot of them in this deck, right? We do see 3 copies of Obanai. We see 3 Tanjiros. We see this. We also see Nobu. We see the Rengoku and also the Gyomei. So we're running a lot of active triggers. Maybe that's the point, but I would think like the name and the Hashira is better. But most of these only care about seeing 3 other card names with Hashira in them, are also the Kagaya as well. So that could be strong in its own way. But the main cards are like the Mitsuri. Being able to get rid of a 4K or less card is super strong, as long as you have 6 or more other Hashira here, so it's a little bit expensive. We also do have the Rengoku here, being able to get double block, which I think double block is pretty strong in this meta when there's so many decks that attack more than once, especially like other yellow decks. Now, only being a 4K is a little bit of a detriment to it, because most decks are 4Ks, and you can't really use the double block if you lose on the first one. But I guess it's if you hit one of these active triggers, you're able to make yourself a 7K double block, which just ends the turn. So that can be really strong. I'm not sure if that's what they're really aiming for, but that does seem strong if you're able to get there. We also have the Gyomei, which I think this card's a little bit difficult for us to get out. We are only playing 5 double energies in this deck, so we have to have like 2 double energies on the back line and then 2 single energies, and then we're able to play this on the front line. But it is a 45K, and it's also an active trigger, so that's my guess for it. But I thought that was interesting as for the deck, when again we have so few of these double energies, but we can use like the Obanai to get it out of our hand. And then lastly, Hashira Meeting. This card is cracked, don't get me wrong. Like, being able to say, okay, look, top 4 cards of your deck, reveal 1 card among them, add it to your hand, place the remaining at the bottom. So you get to search final triggers, you get to search out special triggers, any card in your deck you get to add. But if it does have Hashira, you get to your AP card back, right? So it's free because of that too, and it's an active trigger. I think this card can be potentially cracked, because like, what's the worst thing, right? Like, if you have 3 of these in your hand, you just play 3, and then you just get to find the Hashiras that you need. So it seems really good in this deck for making it so you don't like kind of stumble with your card effects, and like there's no real cause. Like, this is just a free thinning card in the deck like this, which I think is really interesting. We're playing 3 total concentration breathing, which I'm not too surprised about. 4 of the Hashira Trial, which is our special trigger, which is pretty easy to get 3 or more of your Kagaya and your Hashira cards to get removal. And that's kind of really it. I haven't spent as much time on this deck though as the other Tanjiro and Nezuko version of it, so I'll probably need to re-look at this. But I found that this deck going X2 is a little bit fascinating, and I definitely feel like I need to give it another try. But this is the build from Matthew. Congratulations for their top 16. And to wrap it up, we do have Greg with their version of Purple Bleach, with their playing as more of the Byakuya build, which I thought was kind of interesting. Most people, the kind of more popular builds, I think, are kind of of like the Renji Rush, which is kind of like just playing a lot of these 4K raid bodies. But then also most builds are playing Ichigo, which is not in this deck at all, right? We're more of the Byakuya, which on release in Japan, there was a couple more support cards. Byakuya was very strong out of the get-go, which we did not get from this one. Mostly, we did not get Byakuya's sister for this one, but the fact that like the support for it, so it just made it harder to do the raid for it. But I think Renji and Byakuya do make a good pair for some removal techniques, especially since we can use this Renji to give something minus 3k, and then like if we can chain it with Byakuya, like you just get like a lot of like medium-sized removal in a lot of ways too. So, but also the fact that this gives something minus 1k to all characters, and this gives something minus 3k means you get rid of a 4k pretty nicely, which I think is strong. Renji seems like a pretty good card for the deck too, in that way. And I think that, I don't know, I haven't played Purple Bleach in a while, so to see it pop up in like a build that I wasn't expecting is really interesting. We also have like a double block or a Hime, which I'm guessing is mostly to stop yellow Bleach if they're expecting that to be kind of stronger. And then we just kind of have the rest of the deck here. But we are playing like a lot of triggers in comparison to I think other ways I've seen these decks. But like the only card that doesn't have a trigger is literally this Null 2, which is a nullify impact card, which I think is strong. It's a one of, right? So we have 49 triggers in this deck right now, which I think is helps the consistency for something like this in its own way as well. But I'll have to try out Purple Bleach again. I know again it was a fan favorite immediately. I think most people went to more of like the Ichigo builds or like the Renji Rush builds, but to see like a Byakuya in a 100+ person event go X2 and get it in 20th place, I think is worth noting as well. So this is Greg's version of the deck. Congratulations for their top finish there, and that's going to be it for this one. I know a lot of rambling for this one, a lot of maybe conjecture. I know that this is a pretty deep game when there are just so many different decks that can exist at the same time, but I really enjoy following this game. I enjoy having these tournaments for you guys to be able to play in it, and it's always fascinating to see how these decks work and seeing what people play and how they play it. It's a really fun game that I think even when you're watching it, you feel like you're kind of playing along with it, which is really cool. So I don't have much more to say. Thank you guys so much for these. We will be getting more of these events in the future, so do be on the lookout for that, and that's going to be it for us. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you all next time.